This may be the craziest video I've ever done, but I'm about to explain Avengers Endgame using Taco Bell sauce packets.
You have McGann, the Fangirl. Make sure you subscribe and check back every week for new fandom videos.
So to try to break this down as simply as I can, and yes, you do need to have seen Avengers Endgame before you watch this video. There are spoilers. This is your chance to back out if you have not seen the movie yet, but really, what are you waiting for? This is like the biggest movie release ever. Get to the theater! But for the rest of us who have seen the movie and are totally getting sick of the hashtag don't spoil the endgame, like, come on, hurry up, I got plans for like August, let's get on this discussion here. One of the more curious parts of the movie is the time traveling element and how the Hulk specifically says going into the past doesn't change the future. So all other time travel movies except for Endgame apparently handle this completely wrong. So this first packet here would be the Marvel Universe in 2024. Then we have 2019, right after Thanos did the snap. 2014, which is Guardians of the Galaxy, although I would argue, how are they using the same year out in the galaxy where they're not using years like us? But the movie made it canon, so that's an issue for a whole other thing. 2013 for Thor: The Dark World, and 2012 for the first Avengers movie. And what I believe the Hulk is saying is that you can't just go from 2024 and change the past because the past has already happened. So what he's actually trying to say is that instead of this changing back here, we're really just sort of wibbly wobbly timey wimey and writing that bit of history in the front even though it belongs in the back. And that works to explain why future Nebula kills herself from the past and her future self doesn't die or disintegrate or dissolve away or whatever, but it gets ruined with Steve Rogers, who goes back in time, gets with Peggy, and lives his whole life and shows back up in 2024 as an old man. You can't have it both ways, movie, I'm sorry, you just can't. So what's really happening is that when they go back in time to 2014, they're not actually in that 2014. They create a branch for a parallel universe, so instead of going like this, now the timeline has shifted and it's going more like this. And the same is true when they go back to 2013. Although that's another interesting paradox, because if it is the same timeline, then how is Gamora not still alive since the Soul Stone wasn't there for Thanos to take it? Not to mention the whole Pym particles issue. How did Thanos' army even get to 2024? Because they didn't have Pym particles to travel, they didn't seem to go through the teleporter, and Thanos died in 2019, so he wasn't physically there to wait and just show up in 2024, but I don't really have an answer for that yet. Anyways, we get over to 2013, and now we've made another split, and now we have three timelines converging into one point. Same thing again with 2012, except 2012 gets a little bit more interesting, so let me see if I can do this some justice. 2012 makes one time split, but then 2012 also makes a secondary time split because they go from 2012 back to 1970, so now we have a whole nother time split there that is also separate from this one because Loki got away in this red timeline here. And now we have 5 timelines going on at the same time because the Infinity Stones were taken from here, 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 and here. And Bruce Banner really tried to pull this off and make it all sound fluid and nice when he went, hey, we'll take all the Infinity Stones and put them back in the timeline in the exact moment we took them from. And assuming that they all went back to the right timeline, it kind of makes sense. So all the places where the Avengers interacted are now back in a consecutive linear timeline, meaning all of these other realities didn't actually happen, right? Well, not exactly. Because time isn't really one point to the next. Until those stones got returned, the timeline kept right on marching on with the rest of 2024. So our hot timeline would be a Thor who has no idea what happened to Mjolnir. It just disappeared one day during Thor: The Dark World. And we still have this timeline where Tony Stark hugs his dad, and I'm sure that's something that's gonna stick in the guy's mind like forever. Howard's never gonna forget about that. Awkward! And because the Hulk said changing the past doesn't change the future, there's no erasing the stuff that they did here. So like a Schrodinger's cat, it both happened and didn't happen at the same time, whether they put the stones back or not. Is this making sense? I hope it's making sense. If I'm not, let me try to recap this. Because the Avengers went and took Infinity Stones out of multiple points of the timeline, they interacted with the past, and the past can't change the present, so they split off these alternate realities. And because the Infinity Infinity Stones all went to 2024 in this converging reality, that means that putting the stones back does not completely reset this timeline because, yeah, this one's still a straight line. Their personal timeline didn't change, but all these other timelines from 2014, 13, 12, and 1970 did change. And it's all because they came back to the past and interacted with it, so it's sort of a string theory effect. The multiverse where every possibility exists at the same time, and so that's why our Nebula survives in the future, even though she shoots herself in the past, because that Nebula is not from our mild timeline, it's from our fire alternate timeline up here, just like the Thanos that shows up at the end of the movie. So Bruce Banner's theory that all of these other timelines other than the mild would go away as soon as they return the Infinity Stones is just not correct, because there are these entire timelines that existed between 2012, 2013, 2014, 1970, all the way through 2024 that still existed before the Infinity Stones got returned. So even if they return them and get their timeline in order, all these other timelines where the stones didn't come back still happen simultaneously. Time travel, am I right? It's a real nut job. Let me try this with a slightly different angle. So while they think nothing else exists after they put the Infinity Stones back, really every time they interacted in the timeline, they just branched out and made their own timeline. So when Steve Rogers goes back in time and he's like, here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go. And again, by the way, how did he put back the Soul Stone exactly? I don't know. I'm assuming Red Skull has some extra powers we don't know about for reasons. But the movie would like you to believe that he stayed back here in 1970 and then just aged up into his 90s into 2024. That's actually not really feasible for how they set it up, because the only reason future Nebula is still alive is because it's not this Nebula, it's this Nebula. Meaning Captain America actually went back to this timeline and he went through all the years until he either just came into that convergence point and got back to the normal 2024, or we're talking about a real multiverse. So while this Captain America is over here in this timeline, there's another Captain America in this timeline doing almost identical things, except when this Steve Rogers goes back in time to here, this version of Steve Rogers goes back in time to here. And so in parallel universes, they simultaneously do pretty much the same thing, but at the end of the movie, we're actually seeing a different dimension Steve Rogers. Mind blown yet? And that's really the only way it can work, because if we have this Steve Rogers over here in this timeline, well, he's gonna be running into himself a lot and having to ignore a lot and create a lot of problems from that, because you're telling me through other issues like Vietnam, he didn't stand up and there were no other social injustices that he stood up for. He just said, I have Peggy Carter finally, so that's it, I'm done with everything forever. I don't believe that. That's not in his nature. So the best way to think of it is that Steve Rogers was still playing the hero game subtly, low-key, like not as Captain America, but still doing a little bit of hero work on the side, but he was doing it through time in a different timeline, so that way it never interfered or interacted with that Captain America's presence, if that makes sense. I hope that's making sense. I've stolen a lot of Taco Bell packets, so I need this to make sense. And so simultaneously, this Steve Rogers is back in 1970, and he's doing his minor, low-key, not really Captain America, but Captain America-esque things. And it's another dimension's Captain America that meets with Sam at the end of the movie. They just traded places. I hope that that has made sense and that this has been somewhat enjoyable, because this is a really crazy different video for me. If you liked it, please, please, please like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Don't forget to comment. I'd love to know what you thought of Endgame and the MCU in general. And you have been listening to Megan, the Fangirl, ramble on here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time, my dear family members.
Well, that's all I have for now, but this video's not quite over yet. I get a lot of comments that say, do a theory on this topic, but I've already done those theories. So please consider going to my main channel page and clicking on the video tab so that way you can see everything I've done. You will probably find a lot of things you like that you never even knew that I posted. I want to let you know that I also have two other channels, Say Halo Goodbye Gaming and the Fanily Family Vlogs. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed enough to hit subscribe and share. I can use all the help I can get to let other people know that this channel exists. And if you made it this far, leave me a comment that says something like, hey, I made it to the end, and then let me know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. I can't make any promises, but the more people that request something, the more I can look into it. Okay, well, I love you. I'll see you in the next video.